Hey everybody, Adam here with Hometown Acres. Welcome back. So one of the questions that I get asked most frequently in the comments section is where do I buy my IBC totes and how much do they cost? If you follow along with us today, I'm going to answer both those questions. I'll tell you where I buy them, how much I buy them for, and if you don't live in my immediate area, I'll tell you where you can look to buy them in your area. Stick around. So currently I have 10 IBC totes already stacked and ready to go for next winter. 6 of them are Northern Red Oak. The last 4 on the end here are a mix between hard and soft maple. They each hold about 1/3 of a cord. These are the 330 gallon IBC totes. These are the 275. So you can see the only difference between the two is this one has an extra rung on top here. These ones here, a little less than 1/3 of a cord, but I try to kind of give them a heaping top there. I still have a few more I need to put in this one, but they work really, really well for doing firewood. If you know where to look, you can find them for cheap. They're easy to transform into firewood baskets. All you have to do is pull out the white bladder and then take an angle grinder and grind out this little section here so that you can reach down into the bottom and stack the wood nicely in. Or if you don't feel like stacking, you can easily just toss them in too. But anyway, we're gonna hit the road and I will show you where I buy mine from. So we're here with Matt of Firewood Guy of PA and Keystone Tree Cycling. He's the owner and operator. Matt and I actually have a lot in common. We are both accountants. Well, Matt used to be an accountant. I interned at the same firm that Matt used to work at. So we actually have known each other for a little over a decade. But Matt, go ahead and tell me about your operation here and how you were able to turn it into a full-time job and a career.
Yeah, I started at the age of 14. A neighbor was clearing some property for pasture for cows. I went over and I asked him, I said, hey, do you mind if I clear the property for you so that I can sell the firewood? It helps you, it helps me. I don't have to put money in firewood. And so I started with my dad's 1981 Echo chainsaw, a Ford 9N tractor with a little dump trailer, and I was selling dump trailer loads of wood locally for $45, cut, split, thrown on a wagon. And it was funny because I could only deliver to people that I could ride the tractor to. So they were all within like a 2-mile radius. And there was people buying firewood from me that didn't have any intention of ever burning firewood, but they just saw a young industrious kid and they wanted to help them out.
Little entrepreneur.
Right. So I just kind of kept doing firewood, cutting and splitting it. And then when I got my driver's license, I bought a Ford pickup. I kept splitting it by hand, kept cutting it by hand, and was doing pickup loads delivered that way. And then I was going to give it up when I went to college. And my dad's like, no, keep it going. You got a good thing going. And there was a dump truck for sale. I bought that for cheap, like $1,500 bucks, and I redid it. And I started delivering firewood to the city. And then it just kind of, I ran an ad in the paper and I didn't realize how low my price was. And I was just kind of like inundated with all these orders I couldn't handle. And so then I started like employing the neighbor kids to help cut and split firewood for me. And I'd come up on the weekends to deliver, and I'd schedule my college classes so that I had Tuesday, Thursdays, or Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, so that I could dedicate my free time to cutting and splitting firewood. So that's how I spent my college days, was studying, going to class, and cutting and splitting firewood. And I kept doing that through college, and came to the real world, and I wasn't making enough money part-time to like justify doing it full-time. So I got a full-time accounting job, the same place that you interned. And I was there for 4 years, studied for the CPA exam, passed that.
Yep.
And I just got to a point where I was looking out the window from my desk every day and just watching people outside working, and I'm like, I got to get out there and do something. I can't do this forever. I can't sit inside.
It's hard sitting behind a desk, that's for sure.
It is. There's days it's nice, you know,
yeah.
when it's 0, the wind's blowing, yada, yada, yada. But, and then an opportunity came up for us to start the waste recycling part of the business in 2012. And I just kind of decided it was now or never, and I just went and and jumped all in.
So aside from obviously firewood, what other, I mean, Keystone Tree Cycling, your slogan is, you know, where wood is
a terrible thing to waste.
Yeah, where wood is a terrible thing to waste. So what are all the byproducts that you make here?
We make wood chips, sawdust, mulch, colored mulch. We make the firewood. We sell cut slab wood for firewood. Basically anything that comes in is processed and shipped out, and something's done with it. Whether it ends up in a piece of furniture, it ends up being burned for heat, or it ends up in flower beds in front of somebody's house.
So Matt, how long have you been to the scale that you're at now, like to the point you can make a career out of this?
I left the accounting world in 2013.
Okay.
And I've been full-time employed here since then. So it's little over 7 years, almost 8 years now.
And how many cords of firewood do you sell a year?
Honestly, I have no idea. Because it's separated into several different product streams. I don't really quantify it as a total. I just kind of pay attention to some key areas that I want to grow in.
Yeah.
And I have been so busy, I haven't had time to really count up the number per year.
So you said you've got seasoned wood, you've got kiln dried wood, and
Yeah,
then you've got kiln dried heat treated wood? Or
well, we sell bulk firewood,
Okay.
as well as the pre-stacked on a pallet. And there's we kiln dry slab wood, so we'll bring in cut firewood from the sawmills, waste slab wood, we'll kiln dry that, sell it that way. We sell it bulk in dumpster loads for like people that want to stock up in advance and dry it themselves. And then we sell regular air dried seasoned firewood that's been cut and split. And then we sell kiln dried cut and split firewood in bulk that's delivered.
All right, well, anyway, let's take a walk around the place here. I want to see all the equipment you run, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how big some of the equipment is to handle the volume of firewood you're doing. So let's take a walk. All right, so Matt, these are your kilns here, right?
Yeah.
So for myself, I only do 15 to 20 cords a year. Do they make anything smaller that, you know, I could only dry like a cord at a time instead of how many do you fit in here?
We can fit 6 cords in here at a time, and this is the smallest kiln that I know that's commercially produced, and it's called a mini quick, and it does that 6 full cords. And for us, it's all about speed, being able to put turns through there. And this will dry 6 cords of wood in about 3 days, 2.5 to 3 days.
Wow.
In the wintertime, when the wood's cold going in, it takes longer to get it up to temperature until it actually starts drying. So sometimes it'll take 4 days.
So the kiln drying process, you were saying that you have to get the wood up to what, 140?
Well, it's a factor of temperature related to the moisture. So there's probes inside the kiln that we drill into the wood, measures the internal temperature of the wood. And in the wintertime, the wood will go in at 0 or below 0. And then it just takes time for the kiln to be able to bring the wood up to temp. Once it hits what we call heat treat, which is 160 degrees on the inside of the wood.
Okay.
It takes us about 30 to 40 hours of treat time to actually dry the firewood. So there's a big difference between heat treated firewood and kiln dried firewood.
Okay.
And there's a lot of people that sell kiln dried firewood because it goes in the kiln, they run it for a day, they pull it out. Technically it's kiln dried because it was in the kiln and it did dry some. But here we heat treat and kiln dry, and when you watch the temperatures on the kiln, when they climb and the wood temperature climbs together, the internal wood temperature here will go over boiling when we know the batch is done.
Now, what is your moisture content of your kiln dried heat treated wood?
I advertise that it's 16 to 18% but it is below that.
It's less. That's
like
your
12.
cover your kind of.
Right, right. And you can't, like, the moisture meter probe system doesn't work on kiln dried wood straight out of the kiln because it doesn't factor the heat.
Yeah.
So you split a piece and you put it in there, the moisture meter reads all over the place because it's designed to read ambient temperature wood, not 200-degree wood.
So how do you load this? This is the door here?
Yeah, the front door opens, and then we drive in and out with a skid steer, and those steel baskets are what.
So those steel, not these baskets, these steel baskets are the ones that go in.
They're a half a cord each.
Half cord each, okay.
They're actually 100 cubic feet loose piled like that. They dry, they shrink, they come out less than 100 cubic feet after they're done.
And then these are what you have coming right off of the conveyor over there. Let's take a quick walk over there real quick. So these are the steel baskets here that hold half a cord. And you said you load these with a forklift right in the kiln. If you can fit 6 cords in there in the half cord, you can fit a dozen of these in the kiln at one time.
There's a dozen in the kiln, and there's not a lot of room. There's only like 3 inches on either side, and then there's about a foot on the bottom and maybe 10 inches on the top, and that's to force the air to move through the baskets as opposed to just go around them.
Okay.
And they say it makes no difference whether you stack them loose like that or you stack them in rows to dry them in the kiln. So to save labor, we just pile them loose.
All right, Matt, so explain to me what this is here.
This is the bin conveyor system that we load. It fires the kiln. So it's a wood waste kiln. It burns the waste wood that we can't use in the process to actually heat up the kiln and fire the kiln instead of propane or natural gas.
So you're making use of every part of the wood here. So these are your offcuts from the sawmill. This is the conveyor that then feeds into the furnace, which fires the kiln.
Correct.
So really, what's your cost on running the kiln? You might have a little electricity.
Yeah, electric is a major cost because there's 4 circulating fans inside. There's the electric motor that runs this conveyor. It adds up to more than you might think to power those fans for 24 hours a day, all week long.
Yeah.
And this system here is totally automated. Once you program your set temperatures and how hot you want your firebox, there's a logic board controller that has limit switches on all the doors and the conveyor system, and it airs out if the door won't go shut because a piece of wood got stuck. It idles the kiln, stops the fire until you come and fix the problem.
Yeah, but as far as actual heat, you have no expense because you're just burning waste from the sawmill, and
and when it comes to, there's a major difference. People make the argument, well, it doesn't matter, burn green wood, and it burns so much more green wood to do the same work. It's not worth it because you're here loading this 3 times as often.
Right.
So I'd almost kiln dry wood
to burn in the kiln to heat,
because it lasts longer. I don't have to handle as much.
Well, it's the same as, heating your house or whatever.
Right.
If you've got kiln dried wood, it's going to burn longer, burn better.
I didn't believe a lot of the hypes with kiln dried firewood until I started commercially drying myself and burned it myself and experienced it myself. It's just such a difference because most people don't take the time or the effort to dry wood properly in terms of seasoning. They just buy a pickup load of firewood from some guy who says it's dry. They bring it in, throw it in, they never know a difference. I have lots of customers, they burn this wood, they're like, I never thought there was a difference in firewood until I burned yours.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot of benefits to go along with it.
Now, what would you say the biggest difference between kiln dried, heat treated firewood versus somebody who actually does, either cut, split, and stack their wood a year in advance, or they buy a pickup truck load from some jabroni that says it's dry but it's not, and then they stack it themselves for a year and let it sit? If
they properly season it for a year or more, the only difference between kiln dried, heat treated firewood and traditional seasoned firewood is going to be the fact that the kiln drying process is going to kill all the bugs and all the molds.
Okay, so bugs and mold is the difference between truly seasoned.
In this region, it is extremely difficult to properly season firewood because we have so many overcast days.
Right.
The best time to actually dry firewood is in the winter because the moisture difference is greater.
There's no humidity.
There's no humidity.
As long as you have it covered.
Right. So we don't kiln dry ahead. Guys go, well, why don't you fill your building with kiln dried firewood in August and July? Well, it'll reacclimate. you know, I'll dry it to 12%, but it'll reacclimate to the humid summer.
Suck moisture out of the air.
It totally kind of defeats the purpose. It'll still burn good. It'll burn as good as seasoned firewood. But technically there is no difference between properly seasoned firewood and kiln dried firewood.
So the audio here got kind of drowned out, so I'll just give you a quick voiceover of what we were talking about. Basically, I was asking Matt if this was his slab wood that he uses to process and then sell wholesale dump trailer loads of slab wood to people who heat with. And he said, no, this is his raw material for wood chips and mulch. And then another byproduct of that is that they will grind this stuff down and they'll use it to make particle board for furniture. This here is the pile of slab wood that they process and turn into firewood, and there's no amount of pictures or drone footage I can take to do this pile of wood justice. You have to see it in person.
It gets used to heat a school district, actually, and they actually pull the steam and generate electricity when the temperatures get high enough.
Really?
Yeah.
So a school district uses this to heat with?
Correct.
What kind of stove do they burn it in?
It's they measure them in horsepower. I'm not sure, I can't remember how many horsepower it is, but it's a little over 1 million BTU hot water steam boiler.
Okay.
And it's a great big, it's just like a pellet stove essentially. It's a great big pellet stove. It's got an auger system.
Oh, so it's like a hopper.
Yeah, blower fans that blow in, and then the water is just contained in a reservoir over the fire.
Yeah.
And then they have circulation pumps that run to all the buildings to heat all the registers and all the radiators in each building.
I never would have thought that there would have been a market for something like this.
There wasn't. It's a very narrow market in this region anyways, because natural gas is readily available, so there's not a lot of reasons to have biomass except when gas gets really expensive.
Right.
But the bulk of the material ends up going to the board plant.
So this is your chipper down here.
Yeah.
With a big conveyor. And so all of this slab wood here, I'm assuming, gets loaded onto the chipper.
Yeah.
And then up the conveyor and...
Yeah, it goes across the screening system. It gets screened out for chips that are too big. And then there's acceptables, and then there's pins or fines that come off the chipper that go out for bedding.
Okay.
There's 1,000 ways to die in this building. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Yeah, this looks like a pretty big piece of equipment here.
It feeds based on the knives being sharp enough to pull the material in. It's not like your brush chipper, where
so
you got the feed rolls.
You don't have a hydraulic roller?
No, there's no rollers, there's no anything. There's a vibratory conveyor. As soon as the slabs come down and touch the knives, they're sucked into the chipper about as fast as you can see them go, and they're blowing up the pipe over to the screen. And
so then it gets screened.
Oscillating deck screen, and the overs, the chips that are too big, stay on top. They come back to the chute to be re-chipped. The acceptables come out the middle chute onto the conveyor belt to go out to the bin, and then the fines go to the sawdust blower over to the bin over there.
Wow. So here's just one of the knives that goes on that chipper.
Yeah, and these are spent, ready to be resharpened and reused, and then they're babbited so that they're...
So those are already dull?
Yeah, these are already dull.
I'm gonna say those look sharp to me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to tell.
Yeah, they do look sharp, but they're not, because it relies on that knife edge to pull the material in for the next cut.
Gotcha.
So here's the shredder that takes the slab wood and runs it through and turns it into mulch. You can see it has an oscillating conveyor that can pivot around depending on what bay he's trying to fill up. You can see there's 4 different bays, one for black mulch, one for red, one for brown, and then there's a bay there for undyed mulch. And this is where the IBC totes come into play, because that is how the bark mulch dye is transported in bulk. There's 330 gallons of bark mulch dye in each one of those containers. You can see right here he has one of the IBC containers hooked up to the pump, which then is hooked up to the machine, which then is mixing in the dye with the mulch as it's going to the conveyor.
So here's all of Matt's IBC totes. He gets anywhere between 50 to 75 of these in every year for bark mulch. You know, right here they produce all their own mulch, they dye it, and that's what the bark mulch dye comes in. He holds some back for himself for use with the firewood business, but he has plenty to sell. He's got them listed for 25 bucks a piece, which if you've done your own research, you know how much people are asking for these things. If you're in the market for these and you can haul a little bit of them, it's worth making the trip for 25 bucks a piece. Because like me, I'm getting 8 here. If I was buying these for 50 bucks a piece times 8, that would be quite a bit more expensive than what I'm paying. So like I said, it's worth a little bit of a drive if you're in the area. All right, so I just got back from Matt's and I realized I haven't even told you guys where he's located. Keystone Tree Cycling and Firewood Guy are both located in the same yard there. They are in Spartansburg, Pennsylvania. So if you're in the area and you've been in the market for these IBC totes but haven't pulled the trigger because they're too expensive, it's a good place to get them for $25 a basket. Any more than that, and it's really hard to kind of scale and get a full winter's worth of firewood because you're going to be having hundreds of dollars invested in these IBC baskets. I really appreciate Matt taking the time to show us around the firewood yard there. For me, that's just awesome. You know, all that equipment, all those firewood poles, the chippers, the mulchers, all that stuff. It was like a kid in a candy store for me. I think the thing I was impressed by the most was the kilns. That is one piece of equipment I would love to have. When you do firewood, that is the most frustrating thing about firewood is how long it takes to dry out. Anywhere from 6 months to a year, and if you've got red oak, up to 2 years. So if I had some kind of kiln here where I could do like a cord at a time, that would be ideal. But yeah, his kiln operation up there is top notch. Anyway, do me a favor in the comments below, let me know how much these firewood baskets are going for in your area. I really think 25 bucks a piece is about as cheap as you're gonna get them. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, click that subscribe button, and check out some other videos. Thanks for watching.
So I forgot to mention where you can buy these IBC baskets if you don't live near Spartansburg, Pennsylvania. So you want to look for anybody that produces and dyes their own mulch. Like I said, these IBC totes, it stands for Intermediate Bulk Container, and for this purpose, they're used to transport bark mulch dye. So you want to look for somebody that produces and dyes their own mulch. They should have quite a few of these things laying around, and you should be able to pick them up for cheap because it's a waste product for them. You're doing them a favor by helping them get rid of it. Again, thanks for watching.